My parents maxed out my credit card for my golden child sister. So I did this. So let me just get this off my chest, because I've been holding it in for way too long. My parents, they have a favorite, and it's not me. It's my sister Ellie. She's been their golden child forever, and I'm the one who just gets by. I didn't really notice how bad it was growing up because, I thought all families were like this. But now, looking back, it's clear as day. The favoritism wasn't subtle, and it definitely wasn't fair. Ellie's been chasing this dream of being a model for a few years now, and my parents are all over it like she's going to be the next big thing. Spoiler, she's not. I'm not saying that to be mean, but it's just reality. She's had a few gigs, but nothing major, and now things are drying up for her. But guess what? Instead of helping her see that maybe it's time to move on, my parents keep throwing money at her like it's going to magically fix everything. And the worst part? They're doing it at my expense. I mean, it wasn't always this obvious. When we were younger, Ellie would get more toys, more clothes, more attention, but I brushed it off. I thought, okay, maybe she's just going through a phase, and they're trying to help her out. But now, it's like they've taken it to a whole new level. They actually planned this whole vacation to Hawaii just to cheer her up, because her modeling career wasn't doing well. Are you kidding me? Like, who gets a Hawaii vacation as a pick-me-up for not being successful? Here's where it gets really messed up. I only found out about the Hawaii trip by accident. They didn't even tell me. I overheard my mom on the phone talking to one of her friends about how Ellie really needs this getaway and how it's going to be a great reset for her. I was just sitting there hearing all this, thinking, wait, what? A reset? For what? I work 12-hour shifts as a nurse, busting my butt at the hospital. And the one time I actually get a day off, I'm overhearing how they're spending my money on some luxury vacation for Ellie. Yeah, you heard that right. My money. You see, a few years ago, my parents hit some financial struggles. At least that's what they said. And I, being the loyal daughter I am, stepped in to help. They needed a little support, just until they got back on their feet. I gave them access to my credit card, trusting them to be responsible with it. I figured, they're my parents, they wouldn't take advantage of me. Ha, if only I knew what was coming. At first, the charges were small. Groceries, gas, a bill here or there. No big deal, right? But slowly, over time, the expenses started to grow. New furniture, electronics, dinners at expensive restaurants. And every time I asked about it, they'd brush it off like it was nothing. Oh, we just needed a little something to feel better. Don't worry, we'll pay you back soon. Except that soon never came. And I was too busy with work to really notice how bad it was getting. Alright, so this is where things really started going downhill, and I mean fast. After the whole Hawaii trip reveal, I was already feeling like something had to give, like how much more of this was I supposed to put up with? But the thing that finally broke me wasn't even the vacation, it was the stupid handbag incident. So picture this, I just finished a long shift at the hospital. Patients, paperwork, the whole deal. I get home and there's this big box sitting on my doorstep. Now, I don't remember ordering anything, so I'm kind of confused, thinking, did I forget I bought something online? But no, my name's on the package and it's from some high-end designer brand. Like, the kind of place I would never shop at. I'm talking hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars for a single item. I drag the box inside and open it up, and there it is. A designer handbag. Fancy leather, gold accents, the whole deal. My first reaction? Pure confusion. I'm standing there, staring at this bag like, did someone send this to me by mistake? There's no way this is mine. I check the receipt inside, and yep, my name's on it. It's definitely meant for me. Or so I thought. So, like any normal person, I call my mom. Maybe it's a gift? Maybe, after everything, they're finally acknowledging how hard I work. And this is their way of saying thanks. I should have known better. Hey, Mom, I say, I got this package today. It's a designer handbag, and it has my name on it. Did you send this? She laughs. Actually laughs. Oh, Helen, that's not for you. It was supposed to go to Ellie. Must have been a mix-up with the address. At first, I thought she was joking. Like, seriously. But nope, she was dead serious. She goes on to explain how they bought it for Ellie because she's got some modeling gig coming up and she needs to look the part. I just stood there, holding the phone, holding this stupid handbag, feeling my blood boil. So it's not for me? I ask, just to be sure I'm hearing this right. No, honey, you don't really need something that expensive, do you? I mean, you're a nurse. Ellie needs it more for her career. You understand, right? And there it was. The thing that had been lurking under the surface for years, finally said out loud, "You're just a nurse." That's what she thought of me. All the years I'd spent studying, working long hours, sacrificing sleep and weekends, all of it boiled down to, you're just a nurse. Meanwhile, Ellie, the golden child, needed to look the part for her modeling career that wasn't even going anywhere. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like the universe was slapping me in the face. I'd always known there was favoritism, but this was a next level. Not only was I not good enough to deserve a luxury handbag, but my career, the one I'd worked so hard for, wasn't even worthy of anything nice. And all because I wasn't chasing some superficial dream like Ellie was. I don't even remember how the rest of the conversation went. I think I just mumbled something about sending the bag to Ellie and hung up. My mind was spinning and I was pissed. Like, beyond pissed. It wasn't about the handbag. It was never about the handbag. It was about how they saw me, how they'd always seen me. And here's the thing. It's not like I need fancy things to feel good about myself. I don't need a designer bag to validate my career. But to have my own mother flat out tell me that I wasn't worth it, that was a different kind of hurt. Like, they didn't see me at all. All they saw was Ellie and her endless failing attempts to make it big, and I was just there. The reliable one. The one who didn't need anything because I'd always figure it out. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation over and over in my head, trying to make sense of it. But there was nothing to make sense of. They'd shown me who they really were, who they'd always been. And I couldn't unsee it anymore. So the next day, I decided to take action. I wasn't going to let them keep using me like this. I packed up the handbag and sent it off to Ellie. I didn't bother leaving a note or anything, just shipped it and washed my hands of it. But that was just the beginning. I started going through my credit card statements, and that's when I realized just how deep this thing went. They weren't just using my card for little things here and there. We're talking big charges, luxury items, dinners, trips, all in the name of helping Ellie. And the worst part? I'd let it happen. I'd been so caught up in work and trying to juggle everything that I didn't even notice the slow bleed. That's when I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep letting them take advantage of me like this. I'd spent my whole life being the responsible one, the one who always picked up the pieces, but I was done. This wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, or lack of it. I made a plan. The next time they called me asking for help, I wasn't going to just hand it over. I'd been doing that for too long. I needed to stand up for myself, for the life I'd built on my own. Because clearly if I didn't, no one else would. The funny thing is, even after all this, they didn't seem to think they'd done anything wrong. It was like they were living in some alternate reality where everything revolved around Ellie, and I was just there to foot the bill. But I was done being their safety net, done being the backup plan when things didn't go their way. The next time they'd ask for help, they were in for a rude awakening. I wasn't just some ATM they could withdraw from whenever they wanted. I had my own life, my own dreams, and I wasn't going to keep letting them drain me dry. If they wanted to keep spoiling Ellie and living in their little fantasy world, they could do it without me. And you know what? I think deep down, they knew it. They knew they'd push me too far this time. Because after I sent that bag back, the calls started coming more frequently. They'd check in, ask how work was going, casually drop hints about needing a little help here or there. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I could feel the shift. They knew they were losing their grip, and I was ready to let go. The next move was mine. And this time, I wasn't playing by their rules. Alright, so after the whole handbag thing, I knew something had to change. My parents were clearly just using me to bankroll their lifestyle, and I had let it go on for way too long. But this time, I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I'd been keeping quiet, playing along, trying to be the good daughter for years, but enough was enough. They thought they had me under control. They thought I'd just keep paying for their mistakes and covering for Ellie's failures without a second thought. But I had other plans, and the best part? They didn't see it coming at all. So here's what went down. After shipping the handbag back to Ellie, I spent a couple of days thinking about how to handle this whole situation. I could have just cut them off completely right then, but I knew that wouldn't teach them anything. If I just stopped paying, they'd find some other way to manipulate me. No, I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to understand what they'd done to me for all these years. That's when I came up with the idea. I was going to let them go on their precious vacation, but I wasn't going to fund it. Not this time. They'd been planning this Hawaii trip for months, all for Ellie, of course. My parents were acting like it was going to be the highlight of the year. Luxury hotels, fancy dinners, spa treatments, the whole 9 yards. And they were going to pay for it all with my credit card. Or so they thought. I waited until the night before they were set to leave. They were packing up, all excited, talking about how this trip is exactly what Ellie needs right now. I showed up at their house, pretending to be totally fine with everything. Played the part. I even told them, Hey, I got you a new credit card. The old one's been acting up lately, and I don't want you to have any issues while you're in Hawaii. My mom looked at me with this relieved smile, like she actually thought I was doing her a favor. Oh, Helen, you're such a lifesaver. We were worried the old card might not work. You always know just what we need. Yeah, I bet I do, Mom. I handed her the card, keeping my face completely neutral. Inside, I was ready to explode, but on the outside, calm. I knew what was coming, and I was ready. The card I gave them wasn't new at all. It was canceled. Totally useless. But I didn't tell them that. I let them pack their bags, get all hyped for the trip, and sent them on their way. It was the calm before the storm, and I was just waiting for the moment when everything would come crashing down. For the next few days, I kept my phone close. I knew the calls were coming, but I wanted to savor the silence for just a little while longer. Then, finally, it happened. The first notification popped up on my banking app. Decline charge. They'd tried to pay for dinner at some fancy restaurant, and the card didn't go through. I almost laughed when I saw it. A few hours later, another notification. Spa treatment declined. And then, later that evening, a declined helicopter tour. They were racking up failed charges faster than I expected. I could practically picture it. My mom and dad sitting there, confused, embarrassed, trying to figure out what was going on. They'd probably called the restaurant over to run the card again, thinking it was a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. It was exactly what I planned. The phone calls started soon after that. I let the first couple go to voicemail because, honestly, I wasn't ready to deal with them just yet. I needed them to sit with it for a little while longer. Let them squirm. Let them feel the panic building up. They'd been doing this to me for years, and now it was their turn. When I finally picked up the phone, it was my dad. I could hear the frustration in his voice right away. Helen, we've got a problem. The card's not working. We tried to pay for dinner last night, and they said it was declined. Can you check on it? I played dumb. Really? That's weird. I'll look into it. I could hear my mom in the background, whispering something about needing to pay for a hotel. They were panicking now, and it was almost satisfying. Almost. I didn't do anything, of course. Just let them twist in the wind. The next day, more calls. Voicemails filled with urgency, telling me how they couldn't pay for anything and how embarrassing it was. Each message was more frantic than the last, but I wasn't ready to call them back yet. I wanted them to hit rock bottom. I wanted them to feel helpless, just like I'd felt when they kept draining my bank account without even thinking about how it affected me. And the thing is, I knew they weren't broke. My parents had money. They just didn't want to spend it. Why would they when they had me to pay for everything? Finally, after a couple more days of ignored calls, I picked up the phone again. This time it was my mom. She sounded more desperate than I'd ever heard her. Helen, please. We can't check out of the hotel until we pay the bill. They won't let us leave. We don't have enough cash and the card isn't working. Can you fix it? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This was it. No, Mom, I'm not fixing it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. What do you mean, no? We need your help. You can't just leave us stranded here. I'm done helping, I said, my voice firm. You've been using me for years and I'm tired of it. This is on you now. You figure out how to get home. I'm not paying for anything anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear my mom trying to find the right words, trying to guilt me, but nothing came out. She knew I was serious. Finally, she whispered, "But we're your parents. You can't just leave us like this." I almost laughed at how absurd it was. After everything they'd done, after all the money they'd taken from me without a second thought, they still thought they could guilt me into bailing them out. "Yeah, well, you've left me high and dry for years," I said. "So now it's your turn. I'm done being your bank." And with that, I hung up the phone. I wasn't going to listen to their excuses anymore. I'd made my point, and for once, I was putting myself first. As I sat there, phone in hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. They were on their own now. They could figure it out or they could flounder. Either way, I was done. And honestly, it felt damn good. After I hung up the phone with my mom, I sat there for a while, just processing everything. I couldn't believe I'd actually done it. For the first time in my life, I'd said no, and it felt good. Like, really good. But at the same time, I knew it wasn't over. My parents didn't just give up that easily. They'd call again. They'd try to guilt me, manipulate me, make me feel like the bad guy for standing up for myself. And honestly, I wasn't sure I was ready for that. But the thing was, I had to be. I was tired of being used, of being the one they always counted on while they treated Ellie like some princess. I deserved better than that. And if they couldn't see it, well, that was on them, not me. The next day, I checked my phone, expecting another barrage of calls or texts from my parents. But there was nothing, just silence. It was almost eerie, like they were plotting something, trying to figure out their next move. I half expected them to show up at my door demanding answers, but that didn't happen either. Instead, what I got was more declined notifications. Every time I checked my banking app, there it was, declined. They'd tried to pay for some fancy lunch, declined. They attempted to book a tour, declined. They even tried to hit up a luxury store, declined. It was almost like clockwork, and with every notification, I felt more and more justified in my decision. I mean, seriously? They had no problem living the high life on my dime, but the second I took control, they were completely helpless. It was like they didn't know how to function without my money backing them up. And that's when it hit me. They'd gotten so used to me being their safety net that they didn't even try to make a plan for themselves. They just assumed I'd keep picking up the pieces. But not this time. Still, the silence from them was unsettling. My mom usually couldn't go more than a few hours without calling me about something, so the fact that I hadn't heard from them since I said no was weird. I knew they were up to something, but I didn't know what. And honestly, I didn't care. Let them figure it out. They were grown adults. It wasn't my responsibility to fix everything for them anymore. But just when I thought they might actually leave me alone for a bit, the phone rang again. I glanced at the screen and saw my dad's name pop up. I sighed, knowing this conversation was going to be a mess, but I figured I might as well get it over with. I picked up the call, bracing myself. "Hey, Dad," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Helen, we need to talk," he said, his voice tense. "We're still having issues with the card. Every time we try to pay for something, it's declined. What's going on?" I could hear the frustration in his voice, but I wasn't about to cave. "I already told you, Dad. I canceled the card. You can't use it anymore." He was quiet for a moment, like he didn't know how to respond. "Why would you do that? We're stuck here with no way to pay for anything. You can't just leave us stranded like this." That word again. Stranded. Like it was my fault they were in this mess. Like I had somehow forced them to rely on me for everything. "You're not stranded," I said, trying to stay calm. "You're in Hawaii. You're not exactly in the middle of nowhere. You have options. Use your own money." "We don't have enough," he snapped, and I could hear my mom in the background saying something, probably trying to calm him down. "You know we don't have that kind of cash on us. We need you to fix this, Helen. This isn't funny." I felt a wave of anger surge through me. "I never said it was funny, but I'm not fixing it. You've been using me for years, and I'm done with it. This is your mess to clean up, not mine." He was quiet again, and I could tell he didn't know how to handle this. I'd never stood up to them like this before. I'd always been the one to swoop in and save the day, but now they were on their own, and it was hitting them hard. "Helen, please!" My mom's voice came through the phone, softer, but no less desperate. "We're your parents. We didn't mean to hurt you. You just what?" I interrupted. "Used me? Took advantage of me? Lied to me? I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but that's exactly what you did. Over and over again." Her voice broke, and I could hear her trying not to cry. Normally that would have gotten to me. Normally I'd feel guilty and try to make things right, but not this time. I wasn't going to let their emotions control me anymore. I'd spent too many years putting their needs ahead of mine, and I was done. "We just didn't think it was a big deal," she finally said, her voice small. "We thought you wouldn't mind helping. You've always helped us before." "Yeah, and look where that's gotten me," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I can't even get approved for a loan because of all the debt you've racked up in my name. I've been working my ass off, and you've been living like royalty on my money. And for what? To keep Ellie happy? To make sure she doesn't have to face the fact that her modeling career is going nowhere? I'm not doing it anymore." I could hear my dad sigh on the other end of the line. He knew I was right, but that didn't make it any easier for him to admit it. "We didn't mean to put you in this position, Helen. We thought—" "You didn't think," I cut him off. "You never think about me. You never think about what I need or what I'm going through. It's always about Ellie, and I'm done with that." There was another long pause. I could tell they were both struggling with what I was saying, but at this point, I didn't care. They needed to hear it. They needed to understand that things were different now. "We'll figure it out," my dad finally said, his voice resigned. "We'll find a way home." "Good," I replied, feeling the weight of the conversation start to lift. "That's what you should have been doing all along." After I hung up, I sat there for a while, just letting the silence sink in. It was done. The fight was over, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own life. My parents were on their own now. It was up to them to figure out how to deal with the mess they'd created, and me, I was finally free. Update 1. After that last conversation with my parents, I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally get the message. But of course, that would have been too easy, right? Things never go that smoothly with them. A few days after I told them to figure it out themselves, I get another call from my mom. At this point, I'm thinking, what now? But I pick up because honestly, I want to see if they've learned anything. Spoiler alert, they hadn't. "Helen, we're still in Hawaii," she says, her voice practically shaking. Now, I already knew they hadn't left yet because I'd been keeping an eye on my credit card just in case they somehow managed to get access again. But hearing her say it made me roll my eyes. I could tell she was trying to guilt trip me, but I wasn't biting. "Yeah, I figured," I replied. "So, what's your plan?" She hesitated for a second. We're kind of stuck. We don't have enough money to book a flight back, and the hotel won't let us stay any longer without paying. They're asking us to settle the bill before we can check out." I could practically feel the panic in her voice, but it wasn't hitting me like it used to. I wasn't feeling guilty anymore. Instead, I was annoyed. How had they gotten themselves into this mess? Oh wait, I knew exactly how. Years of living off my back without a second thought about the consequences. "And you thought I'd fix that for you?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm but firm. "Mom, I told you. I'm done. You need to figure this out." "But Helen, we don't have the money," she cried. And I could hear my dad in the background mumbling something about selling something or borrowing from someone. The desperation in her voice was real, but that didn't change the fact that they dug this hole themselves. I wasn't about to jump in after them. I sighed. "You've had years to figure out how to manage your money. You chose to ignore that and live like I'd always bail you out. Now, you're going to have to deal with the consequences." Her voice wavered. We made mistakes. We know that. But we're your parents. You can't just leave us here." That was the part that got me. They really thought I couldn't just leave them there. That no matter how much they'd used me, no matter how much they'd taken from me without caring about how it affected me, I was still supposed to step in and save them because they were my parents. But the truth is, I could leave them there. And I was going to. "I can," I said, my voice steady. "And I am." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear my mom trying to find the words to change my mind, but nothing came out. I'd made my decision, and for once, I wasn't wavering. "Helen, please." My dad's voice cut in this time, sounding more defeated than I'd ever heard him. "We're sorry. We know we messed up. We'll make it right when we get back, but we just need help this one last time." That "one last time" line? Yeah, I'd heard that before. Too many times, actually. And every time, I'd believed it. Every time, I'd given them another chance, only to watch them screw me over again. "I'm not doing this again," I said, my voice firm. "You've had enough chances. I'm not your backup plan anymore." "But Helen, we're your family," my mom said, her voice barely a whisper. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Yeah, well, I'm your family too. But you didn't care about that when you were using my credit card to fund Ellie's trips and dinners and shopping sprees. You didn't care about that when you were living off my money while I was working overtime just to keep up with your spending." They didn't have anything to say to that. And really, what could they say? They knew I was right. They knew they'd crossed the line, but they still thought they could somehow guilt me into helping them. Not this time. I ended the call after telling them again to figure it out. I knew it sounded harsh, but I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. They were adults. They could figure it out. They had to. A few hours later, I got a text from my sister. Of course, it was about the same thing. "Hey Helen, Mom and Dad told me what's going on. Can you please just help them this one last time? They're really struggling and I feel bad." I almost laughed when I read it. Ellie, the golden child, the one who my parents had spoiled for years, was now asking me to feel bad for them. Where was she when they were taking advantage of me? Where was she when they were spending my money on her without a second thought? I didn't even bother replying. I was done with all of them. The next few days were quiet. No more calls, no more texts. It was almost eerie, but I figured they'd found some way to scrape together the money to get home. I wasn't about to check in and see if they were okay. They were on their own now, and I was finally free from the constant weight of their needs. It wasn't until the following week that I got another call. This time, it was from my mom again. I braced myself, expecting more guilt tripping, but instead, her voice was different. "Helen," she said quietly, "we're back home." I didn't say anything, waiting for her to continue. We sold some things and borrowed from a friend to get the money for the flight back," she explained, her voice soft. "We wanted to apologize. We know we've put you through a lot." I was surprised, to be honest. I hadn't expected them to actually say sorry. But at the same time, I wasn't about to let them off the hook that easily. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully, but I meant what I said. I'm done helping you. You need to figure things out for yourselves from now on. There was a long pause, and then my mom sighed. We understand. We'll try to be better. I didn't say anything. I didn't know if they really would be better, but at that point, it didn't matter. I'd set my boundaries, and they were going to have to deal with it. After we hung up, I felt this weird mix of emotions. Relief, mostly, but also a little bit of sadness. It's hard to let go of people who are supposed to be there for you, especially when they've let you down so many times. But I knew it was the right decision. For the first time in a long time, I was putting myself first. And it felt damn good. Update 2. I thought cutting them off would be the hard part. I figured once I stopped giving them money, they'd finally realize they had to figure out their own lives. But nope, that's not how it went down. My parents? They went nuclear. It started small with a couple of texts from relatives. At first, I didn't think much of it. Just the usual, hey, haven't heard from you in a while, or how's everything going with your parents? Stuff like that. I thought they were just being nosy, or maybe hadn't heard about the whole Hawaii situation. But then it got weird. My aunt texted me one night saying something like, I'm so sorry you're going through this, Helen. Just know that we're here for you. I stared at my phone, confused. Sorry for what? I replied, but she didn't answer right away. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she was just being vague or dramatic, which, honestly, wasn't out of character for her. But then, more messages started coming in, and they weren't so nice. Cousins, distant relatives, even old family friends started reaching out. Except now it wasn't, how are you? It was, how could you abandon your parents like that? Or, I can't believe you'd leave them stranded in another country. And that's when it hit me. They were spreading lies. I'm not even joking. My parents had apparently decided that if they couldn't guilt me into helping them, they'd try to shame me into it. They'd started telling everyone, and I mean everyone, that I'd abandoned them, left them stranded in Hawaii with no money and no way home. The way they spun it, I sounded like the worst daughter on the planet. I tried to let it slide at first. I figured people would realize it was just a sob story and they'd eventually see through it. But no, my parents weren't just telling people in private. They took it public. Like, really public. I found out from a coworker of all people. We were on break when she casually mentioned, hey, I saw your mom's post. That's so rough. I didn't know things were that bad with your family. I looked up from my phone, totally confused. What post? You didn't see it? She asked, sounding a little awkward, like she wished she hadn't said anything. It's all over Facebook. Your mom posted this long thing about how they got stranded in Hawaii and how you wouldn't help them. People are really going off in the comments. I felt my stomach drop. I didn't even bother finishing my break. I went straight to my phone and pulled up Facebook. And there it was. A full-on dramatic post from my mom, complete with pictures from their tragic trip to Hawaii. The captions were something else, too. Stuff like, when your own daughter turns her back on you in your time of need, and abandoned by the person we raised and loved. The comment section? Oh, it was a dumpster fire. People I didn't even know were chiming in, calling me everything from selfish to ungrateful. And the worst part? A lot of them were family members, people I'd known my whole life, jumping on the bandwagon and tearing me apart without even asking my side of the story. I sat there, scrolling through comment after comment, feeling like I was being punched in the gut over and over again. They'd twisted everything. The post made it seem like I'd coldly refused to help my poor, innocent parents who were just trying to get by. No mention of the years of financial abuse, no mention of how they'd used me, drained me, and left me with nothing. Just the story of a heartless daughter who abandoned her parents in paradise. The next few days were hell. I got texts from people I hadn't spoken to in years, some of them straight up accusing me of being the worst daughter ever. Others pretending to be concerned and asking if everything was okay, like I didn't know they were just fishing for gossip. It was all a sick game, and I was the villain in my parents' sob story. I tried explaining my side to a few people, but it didn't really help. By the time I even had a chance to respond, the damage was done. My parents had already spun the story their way, and no matter what I said, people had already made up their minds. It was like talking to a wall. They didn't care about the truth. They just loved the drama. At one point, I thought about calling my mom to tell her to take the post down. But what good would that do? She wanted people to see it. She wanted the sympathy, the attention, the validation that she was the victim. And honestly, I don't think she cared about the fallout it was causing for me. All that mattered was that she looked good, that people saw her as the loving, devoted mother who was wronged by her ungrateful daughter. And you know what the worst part is? Some people did reach out to me asking for my side of the story. But even when I explained everything, even when I laid out all the facts about how my parents had been using me for years, some of them just didn't want to believe it. It was easier for them to believe the lie than face the fact that my parents, the people they'd known and trusted, were capable of something like this. The whole thing messed with my head. For weeks, I felt like I couldn't go anywhere without people whispering behind my back. Every family event, every social gathering, I knew people were judging me. And for what? For finally standing up for myself? For refusing to let my parents drain me dry? But here's the thing. As much as it sucked, and believe me, it really sucked, I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to back down just because they decided to drag my name through the mud. I'd come too far to go back to being the daughter they could control with guilt and manipulation. So I stopped checking the comments. I stopped trying to explain myself to people who didn't want to hear it. And slowly, the noise started to die down. People moved on to the next drama, the next family scandal, and I was left with a sense of quiet that, for once, didn't feel like a trap. But I won't forget what they did. The way they tried to turn everyone against me. The way they painted me as the villain to cover up their own mistakes. It's something that sticks with you. Something that changes the way you see people. And yeah, it hurt, but it also made me stronger. I'm not their safety net anymore. I'm not their scapegoat. And no matter how many Facebook posts they make, no matter how many people they turn against me, I know I did the right thing. And in the end, that's all that really matters.